Coming up on Jerusalem Dateline, the hunt for Hamas. Israeli troops push deep inside Gaza as the ground war intensifies. Meanwhile, thousands of weapons smuggled into the West Bank. Why Israelis fear this terror hotbed is about to erupt. And hope for the Abraham Accords. Why an historic peace between Israel and Saudi Arabia is still on the table. Plus, Israelis prepare to battle Hezbollah in the north. And this Muslim congressional candidate from the U.S. makes a bold stand for Israel. All this and more on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. The world waited with bated breath today for the official statement from Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah, the Lebanese Hezbollah leader. Take a look. At the beginning of his speech, Nasrallah praised the martyrs who were killed in all arenas as part of the war. Then he expounded on the religious and humanitarian justification for participating in the campaign for the sake of Allah. He said there is no more legitimate and righteous battle from a humanitarian, moral, and religious point of view as a battle that is fighting the Zionists. He also congratulated Yemen and Iraq for entering the campaign. About the October 7th massacre called Operation Al-Aqsa Flood, Nasrallah said it was decided 100% by Palestinians. The execution was 100% Palestinian, and the Palestinians hid it from everyone. He said Hezbollah entered the war the day after, but Netanyahu warned Nasrallah if he enters the war fully, it would be a mistake that will cost him and Hezbollah a price they can't even imagine. I spoke with John Waggy and Julie Stahl for their reactions. John, you listened to the speech. Tell me your reaction to this much-anticipated speech by Nasrallah.
I think most of the world would agree that it wasn't the Gettysburg Address. First of all, it didn't last 7 minutes. It lasted about over an hour, at least. It seemed like more. But, it was a lot of it was the whole setting the stage for almost an hour about we're the victims. He called the massacre that occurred on October 7th, he called it a sacred moment. And he basically talked about all the victims being Gazan rather than Israeli, be expected. He had a few items looking toward the future, which I think a lot of people were concerned about. Was this going to be a declaration of war? It was not, but there was the suggestion that it could be. And he had, for the United States, he said, if all-out war breaks out, you Americans will pay with your ships, your aircrafts, and your soldiers. To Israel, he said, a civilian for a civilian. To the Arab nations, he said, join with us. Cut your ties, cut your economic ties, cut off all oil exports to Israel. So there was some substance tucked into the long speech. Yeah, Julie, well, some people would say it was a lot of huffing and puffing, I'll blow your house down, but it really wasn't what people had thought could happen, a declaration of war.
Yeah, I think, he kind of left all gates open. He said, he was speaking clearly and with ambiguity, and that all scenarios are open. And I don't know how many times he repeated that. And all options are on the table, which it's kind of like he just left it open. It's like, okay, we didn't do maybe full-out war, but if we want to, we can. If we don't want to, we don't have to. So, yeah, it was a lot of hot air and a lot of really hijacking to what happened in Israel and saying, oh, no, that was happening to the Palestinians. Yeah.
John, he also said that it was a 100% Palestinian effort on October 7th, and they hid it from everybody. So he seems to be distancing the blame from him and Hezbollah. Yes, to an extent. But then he also said right after that, that on October 8th, the day after, Hezbollah opened up another front here, or to that effect. We joined the war that next day, and because of us, the Israelis weren't able to focus all their forces on Gaza. So, he had it both ways. I didn't know anything about it, but we were in it the very next day. So, and Julie, Netanyahu said that if Hezbollah and Nasrallah get into the war, they'll pay a price that they'll never forget.
Yeah, and I think, that for Israel, it's kind of like all or nothing. So it is, in a way, maybe up to Hezbollah whether they're entering now or not. You know, Israel would like to get rid of them. You know, with the Palestinian effort, you know, Nasrallah said, you know, this is clearly Palestinian. It's not kind of, because a lot of people are saying Iran is behind this, and, you know, they're just activating their proxies. And Hamas could really care less about Palestinians because they use them as human shields. So, you know, he was trying to say, no, we're for the Palestinians.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah, and John, Anthony Blinken is here, and we got about a minute left. So he's coming in, he's saying he's actually still talking about a two-state solution.
Yeah, he is. But at the same time, it looks as if Prime Minister Netanyahu has rejected the idea of, you know, the ceasefire. I mean, there was a lot of pressure to do a pause, and at least from the outward appearances, it looks like he's holding firm on that. So, yeah, two-state solution, I don't think that can, I think it was for the benefit of the media, basically.
Yeah, because a two-state solution. People have tried that. I mean, we've gone through this since the mid-1990s. Yeah, almost 30 years.
Yeah.
And where they've tried to have a two-state solution. And we've reported recently that even Fatah, and especially Fatah, which is the political arm of the Palestinian Authority, is really behind Hamas. So, John, Julie, thanks for your expertise, your analysis. For the last 2 years, Iran has been smuggling thousands of weapons into the West Bank, using a complex network of routes stretching across 4 countries. With Israel's ground invasion in full swing, intelligence officials are worried that terror groups operating from the inside could open a new front in the war. George Thomas has more from Jerusalem.
Sima Shine, former intelligence officer with Israel's Mossad agency, tells CBN News this map produced by her institute shows the extensive network Iran is using to smuggle weapons to the West Bank and beyond.
Iran is the main proliferator in the region. They send UAVs and missiles to the Houthis in Yemen, to their militias in Iraq, to Lebanon, to Hezbollah, to Hamas in Gaza, and they have their presence in Syria. So what happens in the region, wherever you find any conflict, you find the fingerprint of Iran.
According to reports, Israeli intelligence noticed a spike in arms flowing to the West Bank between 2021 and 2023. It took action, reportedly stopping 35 shipments, seizing more than 800 weapons.
There's been quite a significant process of movement. There was a quite significant consignment intercepted by Israel close to a place called Ashdod Yaakov on the border in, I think, April, in which it was found that quite sophisticated IEDs were being brought into the West Bank.
Then in July, in one of its largest operations in decades, Israel deployed more than 2,000 troops to the Jenin refugee camp, arresting 24 terrorists and seizing more than 1,000 weapons and hundreds of explosive devices. 6 bomb-making facilities were also destroyed. The majority of the weapons confiscated, including drugs, said to have transited through Jordan, a key U.S. and Israel ally in the region.
Jordanians are enormously disturbed by that development, and rightly so.
Israel and Jordan share a 300-mile border that runs through the West Bank. Now, intelligence officials are concerned that Iran is attempting to use Jordan as a key transit point for weapons intended for use by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad terror group, which has base of operation in the West Bank and is close allies with Hamas.
The Jordanian made it very clear, particularly in the last months, that they will not stand for that, and they started attacking.
Now there's concern Israel could face a new front from terror groups operating inside the West Bank.
Yes, there clearly is that potential that these organizations exist. They're heavily armed. They have personnel. They have money. So they have will. So they have the capacity to launch attacks.
Since the October 7th attacks, Israeli security services launched multiple raids in Jenin, one of the West Bank's most volatile cities, arresting more than 1,400 terrorists. Last week, the IDF also targeted a terror cell believed to be close to launching an attack.
Thanks to the accurate intelligence and cooperation with the General Security Service, we identified and eliminated a terrorist cell that was a ticking time bomb. it was responsible for many attacks and planned to carry out a murderous attack in the territory of the State of Israel.
As the IDF continues to pummel Gaza, the government here also tightening security across parts of Jerusalem and the West Bank to ensure violence and potential terror attacks don't open a new front on Israel. George Thomas, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Coming up, will the Abraham Accords survive Israel's war with Hamas? Why Saudi Arabia says an historic peace deal with Israel is still on the table. U.S. officials said this week Saudi Arabia was still interested in pursuing a normalization deal with Israel after the war with Hamas is over. The deal could be an extension of the historic Abraham Accords. And CBN's Matt Galka tells us about the role the agreement is playing in the conflict.
There's still optimism that the Abraham Accords can lead to long-term stability in the region and potentially expand even as the war escalates. The Abraham Accords celebrated its third anniversary in September. The U.S. brokered treaty involving Israel, Bahrain, and the UAE set a goal for expanding diplomatic relations between Israel and Arab nations. The Biden administration continued talks between Israel and Saudi Arabia, with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressing the budding relationship at the UN in late September.
I believe that we are at the cusp of an even more dramatic breakthrough. An historic peace between Israel and Saudi Arabia. Such a peace will go a long way to ending the Arab-Israeli conflict. It will encourage other Arab states to normalize their relations with Israel. It will enhance the prospects of peace with the Palestinians.
3 weeks later, Hamas attacks on Israel shook the region and the world. Speaking in Saudi Arabia, Jared Kushner defended the importance of the accords in the wake of the attacks, accusing Hamas of trying to upend the stability the accords created.
In light of the attack, the Abraham Accords are more important than ever. Israel has to have the security to not be threatened by its neighbors and to be able to protect its citizens. That is absolutely crucial, is non-negotiable, and I do think a lot of the world agrees that that's something that should exist. The second element is that the Palestinian people have to have the opportunity to live a better life. And I think that if you go through the element, it's not just saying let's create a state, it has to be a state that can function and thrive, because if you don't create that, then the people will, again, find ways to blame other people instead of the leadership that's putting it there.
The war with Hamas has delayed normalization efforts with Saudi Arabia, one of the most influential countries in the Arab world. Former Israeli Interior Minister Ayelet Shaked says the prospect for expanded peace with Saudi Arabia remains strong.
We need to understand the reality in the Middle East. I think that currently, as we see, the process was put on hold, but I assume that after the war, we can, renew the process. And I hope that soon we will have a peace agreement with Saudi. It's the interest of the U.S., Saudi, and Israel.
Iran remains a destabilizer in the region, potentially trying to upend any expanded peace talks between Israel and other Arab nations.
The Iranians saw that, knew what that would mean. It would basically mean the end or the beginning of the end of the Arab-Israeli conflict more broadly, which means greater unity and stability on that side of the Gulf, which poses a great danger to the Islamic Republic of Iran, which has every interest in destabilizing.
The UAE became the first Arab country to directly condemn Hamas, and this week one official released a statement saying that the accords are here to stay, despite the UAE's criticism of certain Israeli military tactics. Matt Galka, CBN News.
Coming up, bustling cities and villages turned into ghost towns. Why Israelis fear it's only a matter of time before their neighborhoods become the next battleground with Hezbollah. Now in its fourth week, Israel's war in Gaza is expanding with more military action on the northern border. Some call this campaign the story that is yet to be written. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl has more.
Towns and villages here are eerily quiet. All living within about a mile of the border have been evacuated, displacing around 125,000 people due to the threat of war. The house behind me in Kiryat Shmona got a direct hit from a Hezbollah rocket. The residents were okay because they had been evacuated. They weren't at home. Hezbollah has some 150,000 missiles pointed at Israel. That's a lot more than Hamas has. They're more powerful and can go a lot further.
The city has done something it never did, almost a complete evacuation. All of the city, 25,000 residents in 3 days.
Ron Bar Maoz says the hardest thing has been seeing the residents evacuating.
The residents here are very Israeli, very Zionistic, very patriotic, and very nationalist, and didn't want to leave their homes.
Bar Maoz says there can only be one conclusion.
As residents of Kiryat Shmona, we need the IDF to do everything it needs to finish the war. Also on the south side against Hamas, and also on the north side against Hezbollah. And we hope that they will give them a big blow and finish with this and give us many more years of quiet.
The empty homes haven't kept Hezbollah or other Iranian proxies from launching rockets and attacks across the border.
We understand that the IDF has success in fighting these squads of Hezbollah that are launching these anti-tanks, either by getting to them right before launching or right after the launching. But this is all tactical, okay? It's not the grand plan of Hezbollah, it's not the grand capability of Hezbollah, and it's not the grand plan of the IDF as well.
About 5 miles east sits kibbutz Dafna. Founded in 1939, this agricultural community and tourist destination included Dafna Industries, one of Israel's leading exporters of footwear.
The kibbutz is on what's called emergency routine. On one hand, we try to maintain our routine, but we're in an emergency situation.
Community manager Arik Yacobi says news of October 7th spread quickly, and they understood that violence could move to the north. They stopped tourist activities immediately, and 10 days later came the order to evacuate. Almost all of the 1,050 members of the kibbutz left, except the security team.
We continue milking the cows in the security situation. All the activities are stopped. The hotel is closed, camping is closed. In the orchards, we are almost not picking fruit because of the security threat of firing rockets.
Security expert Avi Melamed says while there's been an escalation here, it's not at the height of Hezbollah's capability.
Hezbollah is Iran's biggest proxy in the Middle East. Hezbollah actually is massively armed by the Iranians, financed by the Iranians. Hezbollah's military capacities are considered to be 10 times bigger than Hamas and Islamic Jihad.
Melamed says it's part of Iran's master plan to eliminate Israel.
The Iranian regime presents a very serious and severe threat to the Middle East and particularly to the state of Israel, but not only, it's also presenting a very severe threat to the world. The Iranian regime is involved also in terror attacks across the world. He's financing and fueling different terror groups across the Middle East and outside the Middle East.
He believes if Israel can put an end to Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza, it would be a very positive development for the people in the Middle East, depriving Iran of one of its major strategic cards.
In that scenario, the Hezbollah will become less threatening and less interested in generating instability and war because the other component, the arm of the Iranians in Gaza Strip in the shape of Hamas and Islamic Jihad, hopefully will not exist anymore.
After the attack in the south, Yacobi says Israelis just want to feel safe and secure again in their own homes.
My hope is that my children can continue to live here in peace and quiet, and also they can raise their children here in peace and quiet. The residents of Dafna will return to their home, without fear that, God forbid, it would happen to them like it happened to the residents of the south.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Kiryat Shmona and Kibbutz Dafna.
Still ahead, a Muslim congressional candidate from the U.S. makes a bold stand for Israel. Why she's vowing to battle anti-Semitism and terrorism in America. Even during the war, Jerusalem is seeing an influx of visitors, Israeli evacuees, as well as people from around the world coming to help. Among them this week, an Iraqi Muslim running for the U.S. House of Representatives.
Congressional candidate Dalia Al-Akidi traveled from Minnesota to see the situation for herself and contribute to Israel's war effort.
I decided to come to Israel to show solidarity with the Israelis, to show solidarity with the Jewish people, and to give a message that you are not alone. You are suffering from the exact same illness and hatred that we Muslims have been suffering for ages from radical Islamism and from terrorism.
Deputy Mayor Fleur Hassan Nahum invited Al-Akidi to visit a repurposed theater manned by hundreds of volunteers, helping an estimated 30,000 plus evacuees receive basic necessities.
This is where we have almost 20 departments of different types of help for the evacuees mainly, but also for families whose husbands or sons have gone to the front lines, psychosocial trauma care. Behind me there is a shop with clothes and books and toys for evacuees to take anything they need so they don't lack of anything. Just thousands of volunteers poured in to help.
Baghdad-born Al-Akidi, a former journalist, joined volunteers handing out donated items to evacuees now housed in Jerusalem.
I covered Iraq when ISIS entered the city of Mosul. I've seen the atrocities of ISIS, and I've seen the atrocities of Al-Qaeda. ISIS and Al-Qaeda combined doesn't even go to what Hamas did since October 7th. So when we hear resistance, no, these are pure terrorists. Good people around the world should fight. My heart aches when I see on TV the children, the Palestinian children. It breaks my heart, but guess what? They're not the victims of Israel. They are the victims of Hamas. They are the victims of the Islamic Jihad.
Hassan Nahum tells CBN News international media coverage can be fickle concerning the only democracy in the Middle East.
From the mainstream media, we'd have about 4 or 5 days of sympathy after they turn on Israel and attack our right to defend ourselves. I think we're the only country in the world that has to defend the right to defend ourselves.
Anybody has the right to defend itself. If I am a mother and my daughter and parade her in the street, I would eat these people. These Hamas terrorists have no morals, and we have to stand on the right side of history.
Al-Akidi is in a fierce political race to unseat Representative Ilhan Omar in Minnesota's 5th House District.
I came from Minnesota. Basically, it's ground zero for anti-Semitism. I came to give a message to the Israelis, to the Jewish people, that yes, you hear Ilhan Omar, but Ilhan Omar speaks for herself. Ilhan Omar does not speak for her constituents. Ilhan Omar does not speak for the good people of Minnesota who are watching the news, who are seeing what's happening.
Al-Akidi describes her very personal stand against radical Islam.
When ISIS entered the city of Mosul in 2014 and the terrorists persecuted all the Christians there, I went on air and I said, I am the Muslim Sunni. I'm against that. I'm going to wear the cross. And yesterday, I took this, the Star of David, and I'm putting it here until we all reach peace.
Hassan Nahum says the war has helped to unify Israeli politicians and expresses her gratitude to Christians supporting Israel.
The response and the organization and the collaboration between people who are political opponents has been truly, truly heartwarming. From the horror of what we've experienced, I want to thank all the support that we're getting from the Christian community from all around the world. We know who our friends are, and we thank you. We feel your embrace.
John Wagi, CBN News, Jerusalem.
For the youngest victims of the war, the traumatized children, healing and hope come through creating any sense of normal life. With chaos all around them, one group of children is receiving just that. CBN Israel and Operation Blessing made it possible for them to have a playground and a visit from a special friend named Gizmo.
The CBN family of ministries is bringing joy and hope to the children of the war-torn Holy Land.
Operation Blessing is supporting the families that are in this hotel, creating a space, what used to be the deck, at the hotel. We're transforming it into a space, a playground for the children, so that they can start playing again, they can start healing from the trauma of war.
We also sponsored a play day with a special appearance by Superbook's Gizmo. At the hotel where we're housing many families, we've started a school and provided the teachers and kids there with school supplies and toys. Thanks to you, these children have an opportunity to learn and to heal.
And it brings the community back together. It helps the kids get back to their normal lives. But when they play, when they interact together, that's the best thing they can do right now. So it's really nice. Thank you very much.
Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. You can access our daily war updates on Facebook and YouTube. And remember to pray for the peace of Jerusalem and the return of all the hostages from Gaza. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.